I'm a rescuer by nature. I have foster dogs. I have 3 kids adopted out of foster care. I've shaped my life around these experiences. And it's not that other causes aren't worthy. I'm just not connecting with them because they're not part of that, my philanthropic heart, like what was born in my heart. People get really sad when others don't care. Like, why won't they care? Because it's just not part of their makeup. It's not in their philanthropic heart. So our only job is to share our values and is there alignment? Do our philanthropic hearts match? Is there alignment? If there is, great. If not, that's okay too. Bless and release, right? Just let them go.
I had a mindset shift,
Yes.
and I think the philanthropic heart program, in a sense, it does this thing to you where it allows you to be so genuine with yourself that it allows you to have a radical mindset shift to not play into what dressed up game people expect you to, in a sense as well.
I actually don't think your relationship with money changed. It was there all the time. You just moved away from what your true self was, and then you went and found it again. You choose wealth, right? But you're not beholden to it. You see what I'm saying? It's a difference of I had it, I didn't have it. Whoa, I went through all of that. And guess what? It doesn't matter.
I'm humble enough to say it took me 40 years of living experiences to kind of reiterate what you just said now about myself. And you've spent 5 minutes with me. You see what I mean? So the intelligence is not in the arrogance. It's in actually, telling people, hey, we need to listen to these voices because these voices know what they're saying. And sometimes they're saying a lot more and a lot grander than the field that they're working in. Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and how we can help. Today, I'm actually really excited for this dialogue because my guest is someone I recently met, but she's a pioneer with a somewhat compassiviste style and radical approach to activating compassion. She focuses on finding a common ground in life experiences rather than marketing philanthropy and fundraising or donations or causes. It's not about trying to find the right marketing equation to benefit the world. It's about connecting at some level, and we'll get into that in a moment. Maryanne Dersch has been coaching and training nonprofits for a quarter of a century. 25 years, for as long as she's been alive.
Yeah.
She teaches them to...
I started when I was 10. I started when I was 10.
There, we'll stick with that one. She started when she was 10. She teaches them to raise the visibility of their organizations so that they can connect with like-minded donors and essentially, and in effect, raise the amount of money comfortably that they need for their causes. She's also an author. She wrote the book, Courageous Communication, How Codependence is Making Your Nonprofit Brand Boring and What to Do About It. She's also the founder of Superstar Fundraising Academy, which we'll hear about in a moment. And she's leading a movement to change nonprofit to human investment company, which accurately reflects the contributions of the sector. But most importantly, by her own words, Maryanne loves, and I quote, ultra high heels, extra large Diet Cokes, and short karaoke rotations.
That is true.
Maryanne, I'm honored to have you here at Compassiviste Dialogues. Let's get to know you a little. So before we get into any of your work, which essentially by your standard and by your model will lead into why you're passionate about what you're doing, who is Maryanne? So let's dig into the early childhood memories and how that built, ultra high heel love or karaoke love or philanthropy love for that matter. How did that shape you?
Well, that's a great question because it really did. I mean, it shapes everyone. And my origin story is I was a later in life child. So I was um, the my I was the surprise kid of the family, and my dad. So I'm from St. Louis. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. At the time, it was Anheuser-Busch was the big shot in town, right? Like that was the big thing. And my dad was a brand manager, and he used to call me Michelob because their tagline at the time was the unexpected pleasure.
Mm.
And as a kid, you don't really you're like, wait, what? But I always sort of felt like a little left out or left behind. When I was a kid, everybody my siblings were teenagers. When I was a teenager, they were living their lives. And I just felt like maybe I was a mistake, right? And that feeling of just not feeling like you had a purpose or you really wanted. And now this is my own internalization of this situation. This is not how at all people experience my siblings or my parents experience my childhood, but that's how I did. And so when I grew up, I had it did a couple things for me. One, it created a lot of empathy in me because I always felt a little left out or left behind. And so I gravitated towards people, animals that felt like left out or left behind. But also I got very, very good at relating to people because I was always with people who are different than me. And I was the take along kid. So my siblings, somebody's got to take Maryanne. Like, well, I'm doing this. Well, so somebody would have to take me somewhere. And my brother had a band and I would go to his shows. My sister was at theater and I would spend the summer, at backstage at the college that she was at. Like I just went everywhere they went and I just learned to blend in and I learned to connect with people. So it was a lot of great skills. And also that it carried like this idea of like, I also will be really overcompensated for a lot of things. You know what I mean? And so in order to, if you're always feeling less than, then you have to be really, really amazing just to feel equal, and you work really, really hard at just getting approval and attention and all this stuff. And so that was the work that I learned to do, which was that acceptance of not a mistake, but a miracle. Because one of my coaches said, Maryanne, you're not a mistake. You're a miracle. You know what it took to bring you into this world? My mom was almost 40. I was born in 1966. That was hecka old then, she smoked a pack of cigarettes and drank 5 cups of coffee a day because that's what everyone back then did. And you will not be denied. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. That is true. And so that is really how I started in the work that I'm doing. And the book that you mentioned is because, and why I sort of gravitated to nonprofit, because that feeling of that empathy and helping the left out and the left behind, then also in the same way that nonprofits feel like they have to just be amazing because they always feel like they're coming from this place of inadequacy or inequality because they don't make a profit. And so they have to be extra amazing just to feel like right equal. And so that's really what my book was about, was that idea of not feeling like you have to be amazing and perfect and have everybody love you in order to just exist.
And so at some point in your life, having that conversation of being a miracle and not a mistake, I sense this very often with people I speak with. There is this quantum shift because here you are visualizing yourself as a mistake, and immediately you're able to disconnect from that space and reconnect in a space where your perspective is visualizing yourself as a miracle. Yeah. And you're accepting that and you're saying, this is the way I'm portraying myself. So it's kind of like, in quantum physics, where an element can be in 2 places at the same time and it chooses which one wants to be observed. You chose at that moment to come out of the shadows of I'm a mistake to the light of I am a miracle. And then that gave you purpose, because at that point you realize, being a miracle, I have something to do in this world, in this lifetime, in this presence. And that somehow now I want to, get into the second part of this realization. You grow, you evolve, you learn, you have value, you have purpose. All of those things that were negative at one point became positives. And then you took this somehow and built 25 years of wisdom in the nonprofit space? How did that 25 years go? How did you get into it?
Well, these are really great questions. I feel so like centered and loved right now. Okay. So, when I was in college, I was an advertising major because that's what my dad did. I was very much like, the apple of his eye, and I loved creativity and I loved writing. And so I was studying advertising, and, I was also, like it was the 80s. Okay. So I'm sleeping in shanties and I'm doing these racial justice marches and all this stuff. Um, and I had a classmate say, "What are you going to do with all this social work stuff when you get to advertising?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" I really didn't understand the question at the time, but it was a good question. And when I got out of school and I started looking for work, I realized, oh, this is the problem, because in my heart, I didn't really care. Sorry, Dad, if you want Budweiser or Miller, like it didn't really matter. Now, all of my friends, it didn't matter to them, but they were okay. But it mattered to me. So through working with a career coach and with my friend, my best friend, who's still my best friend now, who was working in development, he's a brilliant fundraiser as well. And I figured out, because this was like the early 90s when nonprofit, like it wasn't even a career as much, I could marry my creative, self and this idea of like putting good in the world and doing things that benefit people. Wow, I should do that. And so that's when I started in the nonprofit space. And I worked for a couple of different agencies. I worked for a municipality. I did consulting stuff, but I really spent the bulk of it, 16 years, for a company called 501 Creative, where my title was literally strategist and resident extrovert. I worked with the shy developers and designers, and I went out and I really helped people understand how they wanted to present themselves, what that branding was, and help them build consensus and the worldview that they were going to like in the view of their organization that they were going to share with others. Right. And that's where and that's a lot of experience I wrote in my book around, that idea of understanding that, not trying to please everyone and standing in your value. And I would just tell you a quick story. So this was before I wrote the book, before I did any of this. But I knew I wanted to write a book. I knew I wanted to start this business. I knew I had something to share with people. And I was sitting in a therapist's office and I was lamenting to her that my friend had criticized me because I am always in front of the microphone. And she's like, you're always in front of the mic and da-da-da. And I was like, what? And you know how somebody says something to you and it feels so out of left field and you can feel it in your body. And I'm like, what's happening right now? And so I go to therapist, like, Sherry said, I'm always in front of the microphone and da-da-da. And she says, okay, Anne. And I'm like, well, it hurts. And she said, Maryanne, praise and criticism are the same thing, right? That they're just other people's view of you. And a whole person doesn't need praise to make them feel good. And they don't let criticism to derail them. They're going to do what they're going to do. And I was like, whoa. And in that moment, I swear this is true. In that moment, like the divine download came of, I am overly dependent on praise and terrified of criticism. And so are all my clients. Right? Because in the nonprofit space, like, oh, the C word credit, like everybody has to love us. And then we just need all this praise. And we're so afraid of saying what we really want, lest we make a donor mad. And that's what's keeping us codependent and keeping us stuck. And in that moment, courageous communication, everything flew from that moment. Right? Like, so what a gift my friend did in criticizing and leveling that to me, because it really, it changed the energy, and it put me on this path of understanding what that really meant and helping other organizations like stand in their value and not try to be something to everyone. Because if we had a friend like that, that relationship would be horrible, right? If every time I met you, all you were not trying to do is please me, like, come on, right. Let's just be real. It's okay.
Right. And sometimes it's actually a compliment. I've heard that as well. Praise and criticism are the same thing. I had a friend who made all the wrong decisions for some reason. Their life fell apart so badly. And they would come to me because I wouldn't judge them. I would always try to find a way that we can kind of work through it. If it was financial, I'd say, okay, you gambled your mortgage money away and you got to pay tomorrow. You don't have it. I can give you the mortgage money, but let's figure out a way that you can pay me back, so this doesn't become a deteriorating relationship in a sense. I can bail you out. Or, I don't know, you were drinking and driving. Okay, let's figure out how to get your life back in order now. So there's always these issues coming up, right? And he comes to me once and he says, I hate you. And I said, why? I'm the only guy helping you. And he says, you're always so balanced. And he said it in a way that, at that moment, the way he pronounced it and the energy that was coming out, but it felt like it must be awful to be balanced, right? And you get hit with that. But then a little while later, I thought to myself, that was actually a compliment, but it just came out the wrong way. And that was the moment that I realized a lot of the competition in my world back then, because, I was in the finance game and there's a lot of competition there. And in that space, there's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of just negativity. But you realize that negativity is actually saying how amazing you are. It's not actually saying how awful you are, because it's negativity coming through jealousy and other factors that really showcase that you're doing well, right? And
that's a great reframe. I like that.
Much
better way to tell that story.
No, but I'm just saying the way you're saying it is beautiful, because you got to understand the context and to, again, the quantum presence of yourself to realize where you sit within this whole frame of what was said, right? You're always on the mic. You're always speaking. You're always, meeting people, making friends. Some people say that, right? And they're introverts and you're the extrovert, and they say that, but that's not bad. It's just that from their perspective, they see you in that. If they had the ability to place you in that quantum space, they want to place you here, and you want to place yourself in the other space. And so they can't justify the other space. Yeah. But that only says that you're in that amazing space that you are.
Right. Now, and the funnest thing is, because my friend, and we're still friends, it was just a little off comment. And but what happened is
don't listen to this part of the podcast.
What?
Your friend.
No, she wanted to be me. And she always wanted to sing in a band. We were at karaoke. She always wanted to sing in a band. And she saw me kind of out there and putting myself out there. And guess who, cause we're in our 50s, guess who fronts a little rock band now, and and she's having the time of her life. And she said, and we had a beautiful conversation the other night. She said, Maryanne, there's so many times I'm singing and I'm thinking of you, and, because you taught me how to express myself and I put myself into my voice and all of that. And I'm like, oh, so you can see how, everything comes around. But it was, she saw it as a negative because it was from her place of lack, and also it was a catalyst for me, that one comment in allowing this really divine wisdom from my therapist to come and shape a lot of the work that I was doing, with my clients.
Speaking of music, you were the wind beneath her wings. You can tell her next time she sings that.
She'll have to sing that one.
She'll have to sing that one to you, right? At your next birthday, you tell her this is the gift.
Oh my God. That'd be hilarious. That'd be hilarious.
You have a quarter of a century, literally, right? Of experience.
You keep saying
in this world.
that. Yes.
Yeah, because you know what? In this context, I want everybody to feel like it's a lot and it's ancient and it's huge amount of context, because sometimes 25 years seems like, it's just 25 years, right? But when you say the word century, it's like, wow, there's a lot to pack in there. Yeah. And so I want your wisdom to be seen that way. I don't want it to be seen like you have a couple of decades of wisdom. That sounds like really short, right? So I purposely want to say it that way. I want people to understand that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that's 60 months, 25 years is a lot of time. And you have this massive amount of time, which is why I really enjoyed speaking with you about this topic, because there are people out there giving advice and they're in their second year of philanthropy.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but they have a book and they have a course and they have all these other things because they had the money to essentially put it out there.
Yeah.
Because, today there's two ways to put content out there. One is to buy it, and the other one is to bring your expertise. You're bringing 25 years plus another 25 years of history that led to it. So I respect that. But when I see somebody in year 2 and they have a fabulous book out and they've spent $40,000 on marketing the book and, putting it as Amazon #1 and all those things because they can afford to, I don't fall for that anymore. Because I used to be in a space where colleagues of mine were selling $3,000 a course packages of how to make your first million buying property. And their first thing was, well, you take your first $200,000 and you do with it. And I was like, wait, hold on. Where's that first 200,000 coming from? If I'm paying you $2,000 to come and learn how to make money, I don't have money, because if I had money, I wouldn't be in this course. I'd be already where you are. So, I call it a fraud essentially, but that's why it's important to hear it from you, because this is not the fraud. This is, the real thing.
This is the real deal.
Yeah. And it's invaluable wisdom, because it's wisdom that comes through this huge array of experience. And I was speaking with you recently, and, I was really impressed by learning that, by the way you ask people, nonprofits, and I guess by extension, you can take this to the general population and even for-profit companies to actually relate to each other. And that's really the strong suit of where that wisdom comes from. It's, what am I going to pick as the, that relational point? And for you, it comes to childhood experience.
Yeah.
You put the bulk of your work in there. So what I want to know here is, how did you find that this is the space where the compassionate heart can become the compassiviste heart, in the sense that just feeling for something isn't sufficient, right? I mean, compassion is a feeling. You can walk by homeless people and feel compassion. No, it's St. Louis winter, it's freezing, someone's on the floor shivering, and you walk by, you even shed tears. But that's not action. They will still be shivering as you walk by, right? And that's where it ends. But what you're doing is you're trying to bring in that catalyst, that momentum, that ignition that turns compassion towards the goal of eliminating, or at least minimizing, the suffering that caused the compassion. So you're activating compassion, right? Which is what compassiviste as a word means, the compassionate activist. And in a sense, this is what really excited me about the wisdom that you bring, and what I want to learn from it. And I think what everybody listening and watching should learn is, how did that happen for you? How did you see that aha moment, that it's the childhood in me that will relate to the childhood of every other person who can tie to and relate and understand me?
So I don't know if there's one singular moment, and I do feel like there's a lot of little moments. So I work with organizations on their communications and marketing. Mm-hmm. And I would notice that some organizations, they really they got it and they loved it and they grew from it. And other organizations, it was good. It wasn't really embodied, right? And so I was thinking about and working with folks on their communication, and I realized that, that we're doing it. We want the outside to fix the inside. So if we had this image, then people would see us as credible. Or if we looked like this, if we had, right, then we'd feel better. If I had this brochure, I'd feel better. If my website looked like this, I'd feel better. But actually it's the opposite, right? Because when we're creating in a space that says, I lack confidence, so I need this talking point so I can feel confident, then we're creating out of fear. Right. We're creating from, but if we create confidence, and then from that place, right, build our confidence and our value and understand who we are and what we want to put in the world. And then from that place, create, that's a whole different thing, right? Because, right, you and I know energy is everything. The energy by which you create determines the creation. Mm-hmm. And so what I figured out, it was really the energy, because the words and the creation was good. It was the embodiment of it. And so what I was doing is kind of reverse engineering some of this stuff, right, in the communications work I was doing. And then I said, it was COVID. Let's just try it. And let me just teach people what I really want them to know. And what I really want them to know is a couple things. But the first thing is, when you want to communicate effectively, enroll people in a vision, attract people to a cause, it starts with you, right? And it starts with each individual influencing themselves, and then the team, the organization, and then external. Right. So bringing it in more about our own value and how we see ourselves, because if I could raise your profile, no problem. But if I raise your profile and all of a sudden it's stirring up feelings of inadequacy, your imposter syndrome starts freaking out. You're like, whoa, this is too much attention. This is too much money. You're going to block all that away. Right. I call it that. I didn't invent this term, but the ecosystem, right? If it's outside of your ecosystem, you're going to block it. And because it just doesn't fit, you'll defend or support your sense of ego, but you'll block anything that comes in contact with that. So people were really blocking some of the goodness that was coming their way, subconsciously, because they didn't realize they were doing it, because it just didn't fit, right? It didn't fit in this mold. And so what if we could open up that sense of self, open up that ecosystem to allow for more, so that you could receive all of this. And so I really started moving more about personal and professional growth, because that's what I saw people need. There's so many strategies and talking points and tools and magic wands that people are waving at you. If you just have this, you never have to worry about money again, blah, blah, blah. And to your point, like, why are you worried about money in the first place? You know what I mean? Because I was using I think as a microphone the other day, like, I could have the microphone, but it's not plugged in and it's sitting over there. Okay, well, I have a mic. I'm using a mic. Well, I'm using it totally, right? And tools are only as good as the people operating them. So it's all the script and the tools and the templates and all that strategy, but they want strategy to fix the mindset. And what fix the mindset is doing the work, right? And staying and understanding the value that you bring, what you want to put into the world, and then from your organization, really claiming that. And in that claiming of who we are and what we believe and what we want, right? Then we release the need to try to make people care about that. And instead, which is to your point, and this is what I call the philanthropic heart, connect with like-minded people. And so one of the biggest things is not like, I had to learn this as myself. I can't make people care. I can't make people like me. You can't get somebody to care. That's not your job, because people care about a cause based on their own lived experience. I shared you mine. I'm a rescuer by nature. I have foster dogs. I have 3 kids adopted out of foster care. I've shaped my life around these experiences. And it's not that other causes aren't worthy. I'm just not connecting with them because they're not part of that, my philanthropic heart, like what was born in my heart. And a lot of times, like, I use this example. My friend Rachel was it's been 10, 12 years. She had a heart attack after she had her first child. And she became after recovering from that and all that, she became really involved in the American Heart Association and this Go Red for Women, which is big in February, right? And she was super involved, and she was the spokesperson, and she was on all the billboards because she's this cute little thing. And now I'm in Go Red for Women but I'm supporting Rachel, not necessarily the cause, right? And so when she moved out of that, we live our life in 7-year cycles, right? So that was her, like, after she cycled out of that and was like, hey, it's time for a new experience, a new identity, I dropped out too, because I was committed to her, not necessarily the cause, right? Because it just wasn't in my philanthropic heart. Not that it's not a worthy cause. And so people get really sad when others don't care. Like, why won't they care? Because it's just not part of their makeup. It's not in their philanthropic heart. So our only job is to share our values and is there alignment? Do our hearts, our philanthropic hearts, like, match? Is there alignment? If there is, great. If not, that's okay too. Bless and release, right? Just let them go. Because we waste so much time and so much money and energy trying to get somebody to care who's never really going to care,
Thank you.
Because it's just not. And so let them go, let them find their thing, and then you find your thing. And then you got your people out there. You just got to connect to them.
True. And you know what? I'll tell you something from my side about that. And, right now, as we speak, Compassiviste has social media. I never had social media in my life because I never cared for it. I at the time when I was young and Instagram first happened and all of that, I really didn't care for people to see what car I was driving or where I lived or what I was having for dinner or anything like that. And in this very small, tiny circle of friends and family that I had, there was so much communication that we knew what we're doing. We're always together, kind of, right? Like kind of like you and your best friend. If you live on the same street, you really don't need to show each other on Instagram or Facebook what you're doing because you know already. It takes so much effort to post it on Instagram just to tell them when they already know or they're in your life, right? And so when we started Compassiviste, everybody said, oh, we need social media. And I said, okay, I understand why we need social media. I'm not an idiot. But right now we have like 60 followers, something ridiculously small. And everybody tells me we need to create, this content to attract, and we need to follow this trend and do all those things. I said, no, we don't need to do any of that. We need to wait until our convention. When we launch our convention, the doors are going to open and physical people are going to march into this space. Just like, and I give the example of religion. I say a church comes into town. There are two ways that this church is going to have people coming and sitting at the pews. There's going to be one where they force people. And by force, I mean, it could be physical. It could be the Inquisition saying, if you don't go, we kill you. And people will go. Or it could be, we'll give you $100 if you come to church. Either way, people will go, right? But what will happen is exactly what you said. The moment you stop the $100 gift, or the moment you start whipping them for not showing up, they will start fizzling away. But if you were able to open your church with love and with the passion that the person walking in wants to walk in, cannot wait for Sunday sermon to walk in, then you will never lose that number of loyals, right? And so I told people, I said, when we put our programs out there and we're doing the music and we're doing the books and we're doing the art and we're doing all, the climate issues and we're really making change and we show people we're making change. And we have so many varied programs because we're coming at this from a spiritual perspective. I think there's a little bit of something for everybody to kind of want to walk into this space. It's not a very, categorized space, that specialized space that we're only dealing with dogs in a shelter. That's a very specialized space. You need to find your community for that. We also have that, right? If that's what you want, we have that too. It's a buffet style. And I said, let's put the buffet out. People will come. And if we do a good buffet, people are going to leave and say, hey, that was really tasty. They're going to tell all their friends. Maryanne is going to tell every one of her best friends, and every one of her best friends are going to either tell their family or their parents or whoever it is, we're going there next Sunday to that brunch, right? And that picks up. That is the right way to do it. So I'm with you. I don't like all of this strategy stuff. I don't like the money that goes into it because it breaks my heart. We're not talking small amounts. I mean, it's not $50 to have a campaign. You're talking millions of dollars, in a period. If you want to do something really big and successful, and you want to be as big as those huge associations that get the funding that they really need to make the changes, you need to invest that kind of money. And you think to yourself, if I didn't have to invest that kind of money, but I could reach the people that I need to reach, could we purpose all of this to something much greater, much more holistic than Facebook ads?
Right.
You see what I mean? So the philanthropic heart touched me in the way that what you're suggesting is not to go out there and compete for the numbers and compete and worry and stress about the money and the fundraising. And, we're going to have a gala tonight. Is this the right colors for this city? Or, those, because people stress about these things, they're like,
no, they do.
We're in Michigan. We're having the fundraiser. Do we use the same colors as we use in LA? And I start thinking to myself, what about the cause? Like, how much value are you putting into the cause? Right. And you're saying the philanthropic heart is basically you knowing where you're going and how to attract the people who care about what you're doing so that you can have an honest community of people who care about this.
Yeah. And it's okay to have people who don't like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, because that's kind of the price of doing business. I want to share a story. So one of my clients is the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. And so I started working with them a couple years ago. And it's very interesting because if you know anything about sisters, they're kind of the shit disturbers of the Catholic Church. And often the ministries that they work on are in opposition to the church's teaching. So in these sisters, they have an LGBT ministry. They have specifically a trans ministry. My oldest is trans. So that was really cool for me to be a part of that. They minister at the border. They minister to people on death row, the prison ministry, all these kinds of things. And they call our dear neighbor, right? And what was happening is a couple of things. One is, over the years, a lot of people who were donors to this organization knew the sisters from being teachers. And as there was less sisters and they were getting more and more out into the world, they really weren't teachers. So people sort of knew them for what they kind of were, not where they evolved to. And the second thing is that that there was in St. Louis, in my city, there was a lot of upheaval. There was like parishes closing and schools closing, and people were really looking for, like your analogy of the church, the tent, like a place to feel like who they were, to be accepted for who they were and what they believed. And they weren't seeing that reflected in the traditional church. And this was a real opportunity for the sisters. But what they were doing is, and the development and communications, and this was very, I'm not like, this wasn't like we're having meetings talking about being subversive. It's just they were downplaying some of the things that the sisters were doing that they didn't think the donors would necessarily like. Right. And because there's a conflict. So when we're out of alignment, that means who we are and what we do, right, are not in alignment. So so they were out of alignment. Who they were and what they were saying were two different things. And because they were afraid to speak their truth, because they were afraid to make people mad. And this was really keeping them in this kind of cycle of not kind of getting anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Because they weren't feeling relevant. And so, and this takes time, and it's totally possible. It takes a little bit of work, but it took the work working with the development or the mission advancement and communications team, working with them to be able to navigate praise and criticism. What if you did upset somebody? What would that look like? How would we deal with that? And really identify who they were, what their values were, and claim the model that the sisters were giving them, which was bold, fearless, and fun. That was what we sort of wrapped everything around, kind of our brand promise. Like, we were bold, fearless. How can we embody bold, fearless, and fun? You see what I'm saying? And so when they put the trans ministry on the cover of this magazine they do twice a year, and they march in the Pride Parade and all of that, and people are like, you're going on social media saying you are practicing your faith wrong. This is wrong. And you know what? And the whole thing was just to love those people too. It's hard to see an organization that you knew was one thing kind of grow apart. And I taught them how to have honest conversations with folks about instead of being mad that those people aren't coming along, saying, we get it. They've changed. This is who they are now. If that's not for you, that's totally okay. We understand, but if you want to come along, we'd love to have you. But what it did was, at a time when a lot of orders are fading away, it ignited a fire in our community that people are like galvanizing and getting so excited about what's going on and the work that they're doing. So they were able to attract, right, release the folks that it really wasn't working for them. They were subverting their identity to please them. And we have to release what no longer serves us to make room for what does, right? And then now all these new people, new energy, and they feel so much better because they're actually living and communicating their values, right? And they know how to navigate the praise and criticism. You know what I'm saying? And it took about 18 months, but it's like incredibly beautiful to witness all of this happening. And now they have these events. They have this like beer and bites thing, and there's polka and all of a sudden it's really fun. And people are just like, this is great. I had no idea that this is all that they were doing. How can I help? What can I do? And it's like that, like in the church or the buffet, it's like people like, how can I help? What can I do? Like, they're asking you, what can I do? How can I help? Because they feel so invested. And the goal is long-term, like authentic, aligned, loyal relationships. And all the stuff that you were just talking about, yeah, you can pump some money in and you can get some likes and all that, but that's really short term. This is this what I practice, and what this is the long game, right? We're playing the long game here. You're playing the long game.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying? And so those things can give you short-term burst of something, but it's really not sustainable. And you wind up and then you wind up like cycling through a lot of people and putting a lot of energy. And so the whole goal is to understand who you are individually, who you are as an organization, put that out there to attract those like-minded people. So instead of your marketing being trying to convince people that they should do something, it's, hey, this is who we are. If you're interested, let's talk. If not, totally okay. You know what? I say this all the time. Our pain comes from the gap between who people are and who we want them to be. So in the practice of influence, like I love people for who they are. And I don't need them to change or be different in order to participate with me. Right? Like I'm asking you to change your value system to come along. No, that's never, it could happen, but it's really not going to happen. Right?
So you really ended that sentence with the question I had in mind. Can it happen though? Because you say it doesn't really happen, the shift in the value system, right? And I feel that I had a shift in my value system because there was nobody more addicted to money than I was. And today I don't understand the value of money beyond what it serves to promote the things that I do value, to move the things that I do value. So in a sense, I had a mindset shift, and I think the Philanthropic Heart program, in a sense, it does this thing to you where it allows you to be so genuine with yourself that it allows you to have a radical mindset shift to not play into what dress up game people expect you to, in a sense as well. Because there is a place, for example, you said your eldest is trans. And let's assume for the sake of this conversation that I am against it. Okay. And before, I used to feel that if I was against it, I couldn't share that with you. I'd have to say, oh, Maryanne, how is it? And, how's that feel? How does it work? And all of the, ask you simple questions to have a conversation and make you feel like it's a safe place. And now I know why I used to do that. I used to do that because you were always a potential client. You see what I mean? You were always, any human was a potential client. And people used to say, Ali, she doesn't have any money. And I said, today she doesn't have any money, but I know she bought a lottery ticket. Tomorrow, she might be Miss State lottery ticket winner. And guess who she's going to invest her money with? So I was that crazy. I would think out scenarios where everything was covered for me to have that state of mind, a focused state of mind, right? Today, I really connect with what you're saying, because today I feel that I can have my opinion and share that opinion with you and have it not be your opinion, but appreciate it in a way that we can both disagree, but yet even be friends in the fact that we disagree about the way we approach things, because we both live compassionately in the world. So, and I really think this is something, I learned from ancient history, because I grew up with a lot of religion. I went to boarding school, kind of a Catholic system. And I come from a Muslim family. And then throughout my university years, which was a good 11-year stretch of schooling, most of my schooling was done in one school. And that one school in my programs was predominantly Jewish kids. And a lot of them, were Orthodox Jews. So I learned a lot about Judaism through that, and I even took courses and stuff. So this Abrahamic, mindset, and then, Buddhism experiences and Sufism and things like that, and some other spiritual experiences that I had over the last decade, really take me back into history. And it brings in thoughts of, Jesus, Moses, and all the way to new people, all the way to Gandhi, for example, more recent people who, when you study them, you realize part of their success was the genuineness of the message. When Moses started driving people from Egypt all the way, to Israel, it wasn't a matter of force. It was a matter of, hey, this is the genuine feeling I have. This is the mission I'm embarking on. If you would like to join, follow me. There was never a kind of mandate. There was never this kind of force. Whereas today I'm feeling, and again, this is why I really admire what you're doing, because just in the United States right now, in this instant, there's so much political heat that is breaking up families. Because how dare you like Trump today, for example, in some households, and in some other households, how dare you even, mention his name with any derogatory comment attached to it? And real fights break out. I mean, I actually have friends who brothers are not talking to each other right now because of, the political situation. And I feel that there can be this conversation. People can be genuine. You can have dislike for Trump and you can have like for Trump. You can be on either side. There needs not be the violence. There needs not be the hate. And your work is not really, the ceiling of your work doesn't stop at nonprofits for me. The philanthropic heart, it really expands way beyond that, because since I spoke with you, there was the assassination attempt. And I looked into that and I saw how much pain and hate spewed out. I mean, there were people saying, oh, if it was an inch further, he would have died and it would have been happy or whatever. And you're thinking that's a human being at the end of the day, right? So there's so much going on with the work that you're doing that I feel like it grows way beyond the just the philanthropy mindset. I think it goes to your heart, be genuine, but be loving, be genuine, find your tribe, do the good things that you can do with where your heart's at. So, like you said, if it's a church thing, if it's a animal shelter, whatever it may be, go out there, put your heart into what you have the passion for and support it. But that doesn't mean just because you support, animal shelters and taking care of animals or animal rights, that you should then see somebody buying meat at the grocery store and just go crazy on them. Right? I mean, that's where you're coming from. And that really builds society so that those two people can kind of maybe even merge at some point.
Right. And I had a mentor when I started my business a few years back who was very, very different than me. And any issue, we were on the opposite side. And I said, I'm happy to listen to you. When I feel like you're trying to convince me to see it your way, that's when we pause, right? You're like, you can share with me what your thoughts are on climate change and all of that, because you're sharing what your thoughts are. But if you're trying to convince me to change my thoughts, we're going to pause. And he was like, can do, right? Because it's fine to listen. I just, and I want to go back to something that you said, because I think this is really interesting, is because you said you had a big, big shift, right, in your life, right, with your relationship with money. And so the question was, does my heart change, right? Like, because that's your core set of values. And I think, I want to say this is a yes and thing. I think typically it does not, right? I mean, typically, and unless you are on a journey as you were to really explore that, or something like my friend who had a heart attack, like something happens to you, it typically doesn't change. But I would say, because when you said something, and I'm just going to say, you can receive this however you want, but I actually don't think your relationship with money changed. I think it was always there. And because the addiction was like filling this like hole, but the hole was like, I don't know. I just get a sense of like, it's not like, oh, I didn't like, it was there all the time. You just moved away from what your true self was. And then you went and found it again. That's what right? Mm-hmm. Because that was because I think if your true self was like to have wealth, it's like, cause that constant, like that desire, like that's never enough. It's never enough. It's never enough because it was never about the money. And then you realize, wait, it really wasn't about the money. But I think that was always in you. You just moved away from it and then moved back towards it. You know what I mean? So I don't see it as much as like, oh, I changed my values. I think your values were there. You were acting out of alignment with them, which was why there was this, you felt like that addiction, that desire, but then you came in alignment, right? When you were back in alignment, like, oh, okay. Now you can, it's a choice, right? I talk about the energy of choice. You choose wealth, right? Right. But you're not beholden to it, but you could have it, but it's you're choosing it. It doesn't hold, right? You see what I'm saying? It's a difference of I had it, I didn't have it. Whoa, I went through all of that. And guess what? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right. And, I had it. I did. Oh, whoa, that was an adventure. And from all of that, I understand where the alignment is and where, right. And so now if there's I'm choosing wealth, it's not a need. Like, it's like, I need it. I have to have it. It's like, I choose it. I get to have it. And so one of the things I talk with people about is that energy of choice of like, I need to call this donor, or like, you're like, I need to see everybody as a client. You're right. I choose to, I get to call this person. I get to ask them for, that's the energy of choice is a whole different thing. And so it's that, right? Or it's like the resetting, like, okay, so now I'm choosing wealth. I'm not beholden to wealth. I get to choose it. That's just what came through for me.
Yes, no, you're right, and the choice also, I'll tell you, it has allowed me to be selective, whereas before I didn't have that option. So when you speak of choice, before, like I told you, everybody's a potential client, right? There were no values. It was just a financial transaction based on certain events, and that's it. Now I've actually had a person who could have changed Compassiviste's kind of trajectory upside down. I mean, we would have shot to the moon with the money the person was willing to provide, but there were essential core values that didn't align. And because those core values didn't align, I said no. And when we left that meeting, team members were looking at me and saying, if there was no law against violence, I would actually beat you up right now. That's one of the guys said that to me. He said, if there was no law against violence.
They were so mad at you for turning that down. He was
so mad at me for turning that down. They said, do you know what you just did? And do you know who that was? And that person is going to tell everybody that this happened and nobody's going to fund this. I said, you know what? That's fine, because this funding was not going to do what we wanted to do anyways. It would have just taken Compassiviste off alignment, like you said. This train heading, I don't know, let's call it from St. Louis to New York is now going to turn from St. Louis to Charlotte. It's not the same place. And we were willing to go to New York. We wanted the money to go to New York. We didn't want to go to Charlotte. So that money is not going to help what we're trying to do. So it didn't matter. Just like you said, it didn't matter. And I'm beginning to see that now. But it took me a whole lot of money, half a lifetime, and all of this that I went through and going through essentially to get to a little bit of what you have essentially packaged and serving people today, which is what I always tell people. I tell them, you have no clue. I'm so grateful for the digital age and technology, because if I'm smart today, if I'm intelligent, I can call Maryanne, and in a few courses and in a little bit of support from Maryanne, I can really have 30, 40 years of education and knowledge and wisdom that I would not probably have anyways in 200 years of my life, because my life would have never shaped in the way for me to learn that education. I did it myself. I'm humble enough to say it took me 40 years of living experiences to kind of reiterate what you just said now about myself. Yeah. And you've spent 5 minutes with me. You see what I mean? So the intelligence is not in the arrogance. It's in actually, telling people, hey, we need to listen to these voices, because these voices know what they're saying. And sometimes they're saying a lot more and a lot grander than the field that they're working in.
Yeah.
And I really, appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
And now I want to also say, going back, to social media and all the other things about, I have to call all the clients and whatnot, contrary to the belief that quantity matters, I find when it comes to making a difference, the impact that the nonprofit sector really wants to make. Sure, quantity helps in some ways, like you said, in the short term, but without the passion for change and progress in the specific context that they're in, there would be no advancement. So my question here is, as an organization kind of grows and reaches its stages where, or its milestones where it overcomes these challenges. So the church that you're working with, the sisters you're working with, 18 months later, you're in a place where, they're excited, they're happy, things are happening, things are going well. How do you support, because that, for me, that's phase one, for example, right? You went through phase one with them over 18 months. You helped them overcome. You've helped them grow. You've helped them become successful in what they're doing, find their alignment, actually become efficient in their momentum, right? The electricity is flowing efficiently now. There's no friction involved. So that's all beautiful. Phase two for me would be, what does Maryanne's system or model propose for growing from that space? So do they now continue? Do they stay? I mean, do you reach a point where you become kind of like flat and you just stay there? Or does your model then kick into new gear and say, hey guys, now we're going to playbook number 2?
So that's a yes and. Depends on where we're at. In this situation, this was 18 months, like this was over 2.5 years. I was working with them on a retainer for 18 months, but it really was they got it. My goal is to up level your skills so that you don't need me. And there's we've gotten hey, I'm here. We can always fine tune, but it was my goal was to help them create a process of enrollment to, we had a lot of work to do to be able to do that. And so that what I call completion, now but there's a couple of things because we are always learning and growing. Right. And the course that I run a course for individuals from different organizations come together in this little sacred space we create. And we learn how to understand how to become better leaders and influencers to ourselves, to others, and to our community, and how to sustain that. And then from that, I have a long term, because I believe that, and I mean, it takes a year to really implement anything new. It takes a year. And then if people want to keep working with me, I have a back end program, and I have a few people in that have been in that program for 3 to 4 years. And as long as we're still learning, right, they're going to be there. Then there comes a time where you got to fly. I had a coach for 5 years, and I just completed in January. And it's sooner or later, baby's got to fly. You know what I'm saying? So they get every ounce of everything they can get out of this. And they're like, yeah, I'm ascended. And then something new comes up, and I could either help them with that, or maybe somebody else is there, because it's always in the ascension, right? In the ascension. When I first started doing this work, around really becoming the conscious leader, and I remember asking a hypnotherapist that I worked at, if I go higher, won't that be farther you fall? And she goes, no, because your standards raise every time. Right. And so
the floor goes up with you.
Right. The floor. So we work on we're going to raise our standards. And then because we want to create this cathedral ceiling, we're going to raise our, and then we create the boundaries and agreements with ourselves in the field of this agreement field to support those, right. To support those walls so that we create this structure where we can operate at a higher level. And a lot of times people, I tell folks all the time, no one's going to be more excited about fundraising than you. No, right. You set the emotional temperature. So if you're in resistance, it's going to be hard to get other people to do it. But if you're excited, you have confidence, you're comfortable, they're going to attach to that, and they'll either rise to meet you or they'll fall away. And either way is okay. I train boards a lot. I've always got some members that are super excited and they love it, and others that it's fine. It's okay. They're never going to do it. It's all right. You know what I mean? It's okay. They have other gifts they can contribute, but it's people are going to rise to meet it or they'll fall away. So it's about raising the standards for yourself, for what you will and will not accept, and then from that place, people just rise up, and again, like I said before, folks just want, oh, if I had this, then I would seen as credible. I had a client, she said, what do you want? I want to be credible. What would it mean for you to be credible? This, these people would respect us. And I'm like, but they don't get to dictate your credibility. You're so it's about the sovereignty. No one gets to tell me, like if somebody says yes or no to that donation, if somebody's your client or not, like in the past, like that's okay. I'm still the sovereign one, and tapping into that sovereignty and really helping people like claim that. And then from that place, it's people are attracted to authenticity and transparency. There, like you said, there's so much buying, um, buying your attention and people like trying to sell you stuff and inauthenticity and filters and all that stuff with social media that you probably don't like because for all those reasons, because it feels really inauthentic.
And the numbers, people throw equations at me of how you're buying followers, and I say to myself, this is very much aligned to selling yourself. Like, I don't want to sell myself. I'm sorry. I want people who respect what I'm saying or respect what I'm doing and think this is noble. I would like to be a part of this noble act that we're all going to do together. That is how I'd like to meet people, and I'd like to do that in every aspect of my life, which is why I really believe what you're doing is grander than just nonprofit fundraising. Because if I'm not going to sell myself to raise money to keep the lights on at Compassiviste, I'm not going to sell myself when I go on a date either. I'm not going to sell myself when a lot of other things either, because I start building these core values within myself that don't allow me to kind of transact myself.
Yes, becomes transactional. And so like, and when, you people are making friends with you because you had a lot of money, like that's, inauthentic at best and manipulative at worst. So that's what I say, that relationship first, the money will follow. I have a relationship with you because there's some alignment, and we'll both benefit from this relationship. But when I put the money first, that's when it gets icky. Right. And that, and that's kind of because when you were talking about leaving that money behind, there are, maybe it's not that much money, but there are situations almost every day where a donor will say, well, if you do this, I'll give you the money.
No.
Right. And I was training this group of Marines, former Marines who ran this organization. And we spent the whole day just talking about their value system and aligning and grounding them in their values. And it was all about the specific experience of being Marine, which they felt is very different than other branches. Okay, great. We talk about that. We go through that. And then one of the guys says, I had a donor say, do you serve other branches of the military? Because if you did, I might be really interested in funding it. And he said, what should I have said to that person? And I said, well, what do you think I would say that you would say to that person? And he said that we are Marines and this is a very specific culture. And we really couldn't honestly serve other branches in the same way. It wouldn't connect. We are who we are. This is what we've committed to. We'd love to have you, and if not, that's okay. If that's not for you. If you see it more good. And so I said, great, go tell him that. And he went and told him that. And the guy was like, oh, okay. Like it was just a question, but this person would have literally taken this money and changed the whole organization. You know what I mean? He could have said, well, yeah, okay, now we should serve other people because this happens all the time. Right. Because like, well, if you do this program, I'll fund it. Like, well, that's not really, what we do. Okay. Well, maybe we should do it because they're going to give us money to do it. And now, because you feel like you can't say no to the money because what you did was really brave, even though other people were really mad about it. But like just saying, hey, no, that's not for us because this is truly who we are. And if that isn't for you, I completely understand. And most of the time when you do that, people go, oh, okay. It was just a thought that he had. It wasn't an imperative.
Right.
And,
and I think sometimes they respect you, right? Sometimes they even respect you because I had another instance where somebody, wanted to collaborate on something with us. And I said, but this is important to us in this way. And they kept pushing and pushing and they realized I'm not budging. At the end, they said, you know what? I'll work with you only because I know you hold on to your values. And that brought a certain amount of respect to them as opposed to being able to purchase my values in a sense.
So when people feel, seen and heard, accepted for who they truly are, they will remember you. Right. And so that you didn't try to talk them into something or getting them. I did this training once and this woman said, Maryanne, I get it. I get everything you're saying. I get it. I understand. Respect the no, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. And so she said, but I went back and I told my boss, hey, she had seen a donor who said not this year. And she said, he said not this year. And the guy was like, well, the boss said, well, can't you go back and get something? And she was like, what do I do? And I said, well, that's, it's like, I could go back and get something, but do you think he's really going to want to give us? That's the short game. Are we playing the short game or the long game? Because if we're playing the long game, we say, absolutely, I completely understand. It's been a rough year. We'll, thank you so much for everything you do. We'll see you next year. And we'll talk then. No problem. You know what I mean? Let that person have their dignity intact and just let them go. Right. And you know what I mean? Because then that person will be like, thank you so, oh my God, thank you so much. Because they felt seen and heard and respected. And even if they decide, hey, it's not for you, they will refer you on. They will think of you. And you are just, creating us. All we want is to be like, is it safe? Right? Am I going to be accepted for who I truly am? And in the talk thing you were talking about of like the people with the political is a Trump, blah, 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 or, will I be accepted for who I truly am? Like they're not being accepted for who they truly are, right? Because I'm going to love you. I'm loving you for who I want you to be, not who you really are, right? And that's the source of that pain. But it is hard sometimes. It can be hard to love people, right? I don't even have to like it or accept. I don't even have to like it. I don't have to agree with it. All I have to do is accept that it's your truth. And once you do that and you accept people at their truth, they're much more open to what you have to say. And even when I'm talking with my son, my son's 20, he's my middle kid. And he just called me the other day and he was just sobbing. And he was having some kind of problem. And and the whole thing was like, oh, I want to make his pain like, oh, so it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I said, tell me what's going on. That must have been so hard for you. You know what I'm saying? Like that, like instead of, instead of giving him advice, telling him what to do, trying to fix his stuff, just being there for him. And then when I felt like he felt seen and I said, can I share with you what I think about this and what I see in this? He's like, yeah, sure. Because he was ready to receive that. One time I said, I understand. He goes, you don't understand. You're like, you're right. I don't think I do. Let me say this. Am I getting close? And he goes, yeah, okay. But see, if I said, you don't understand. You're right. I don't. And so that's when I talk about like relationship with donors. You don't have to pitch it, sell it, convince it. You don't have to, all you have to do is, witness them, have them feel seen and heard. And that's a fun thing to do all day long. It's a really great thing to to spend your day doing.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's absolutely right. And like I said, it will work. I'm sure you've proven over the years that it works and it helps and, it brings people to the place they should be. And, with that, it kind of, it's, taking your passion to bring like-minded people together by the power of, some of the most intimate and vulnerable experiences and recollections in every human's life that becomes that bridging momentum to say, I feel you, or I understand you, or I went through that.
We feel like we have to have the right words, the right message, the right this and this, but it's not about what you say. It's about receiving those stories and how you make people feel and, and connecting with their stories, which is so much more powerful than, we think about all the, how are we going to pitch this or say this, the right magic mix of words that's going to make somebody do something instead of just receiving someone and validating them. And then they go, yeah, oh my God, that's right. And from that place, then they relax. And once they relax, they're going to be more open to what you have to say. But only up until they feel seen and heard and they relax, right? And they're like, yeah. And you establish that foundational trust. And then it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Tell me more.
And you know what? In twisted way of thinking about it. It's really using sales tactics in a reversal of it, because sales tactics, it's kind of like, I'll say whatever you want. I'll acknowledge whatever you want and all of that, but in a fake manner. I'll be the fraud. I'll say, oh, Maryanne, say you come to my store and you're buying a dress. You look gorgeous in this dress. Oh, the heels fit you perfectly. Oh my God, wow, this was made for you. Meanwhile, in my head, I don't believe it, but I'm selling it to you. And now you're acknowledging it. You're taking that energy and you're like, oh, I look beautiful. You look at yourself in the mirror. You feel good about yourself. You buy the dress. But now imagine taking out that fakeness and telling Maryanne, look around the store, see what you like, put it on, and I'll tell you which one I really think looks good, right? And then Maryanne does that, and I say, I really like the red one better. And she says, well, I really like the blue one better. Well, then you have this choice, this conversation, you feel the confidence, and you genuinely buy the one that you feel most confident to go out with. Because that's what we do when we purchase clothes, right?
Yeah,
and we try to build confidence into that.
That's sales as service. That's what we call that, right? And my job is to serve you. Yeah. That's it. And as long as when I'm of value to you, you'll be of value to me. So my job is to serve you to the highest and best of my ability. And that is
in an honest and genuine way.
Right. Because I often talk about, because I train people to master influence. Like, what's the difference between influence and manipulation? Well, in influence, the way I see it, not influence like influencer, like influence like everybody wins, right? I'm enrolling you in something but in manipulation, I win. It doesn't matter if you win or not. It doesn't matter to me, right? I just want something. So I'm not going to invite somebody into my program if I don't think I can serve them. A lot of times people say, oh, can you come fire up my board? And I'm like, yeah, that's not really going to, if you're looking to achieve A, B, and C, that's not going to do it. And I can really help you do that, but I'm just going to take your money and it's not going to really do anything for you. And they like, oh, okay. So I just don't do that anymore because it wasn't really benefiting them. And people they're shocked that I won't do it, but I just know what works and that doesn't work.
And that's the sad part of today's world.
And if this is something you really want to fix, can totally get you there. It's going to take more than showing up for 45 minutes at your board meeting.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yes. I hear that. It's going to take more than one YouTube video to fix things. And people don't want to hear that. How do people get in touch with you and find you and connect with your work and be able to use your wisdom and the expertise and everything to kind of get to the next step?
Thank you. My website is courageouscommunication.com. I have a ton of resources. Every week, that's how I met you. I do a podcast. I deliver a lot of content. I deliver my own content. And I also do monthly. I commit to one free, what I call showcase a month. So if people want to, check me out a little bit more, you can always register for those. And, there's and I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on that much social media either.
Good.
A little bit. But it's like you're building your brand on, when I say you're building your brand on rented land, I read that line today, it's really about moving people off and into your orbit. But I give great content every week so people can connect with me on my website. And there's a little link there if you want to book a call with me, if you're interested in talking more. I really help development directors, executive directors, CEOs just reconnect with their power and, enroll a community, right? We're talking about enrolling that community of support.
Fabulous. And, the more I speak with you, the more I think we really have to work together to bring some of the things you're saying into a more global space, because there's so much value in the stuff that you're saying beyond the fact of this one-on-one kind of sessions with people. So I love what you're doing. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
It's really enlightening to hear things from a perspective like yours. And to the audience, subscribe and share this episode specifically as much as you can, because we need to make sure Maryanne's message of genuine, loyal connections grow the brands and grow the movements as opposed to transactional capacities. We're here to help change the world. Thank you very much for being on this episode. I'm Ali Horiak. Goodbye.